Welcome to our channel. Before we get started, please consider liking and subscribing so we can bring more stories like this to you.
Witness in the shadows. The smell hit Finch first, a greasy symphony of stale fries, rotting cardboard, and something vaguely resembling dead fish that he wrinkled his nose, pulling his threadbare scarf higher, and edged deeper into the alley. Rain had slicked the brick walls, reflecting the neon glow of O'Malley's bar onto the overflowing dumpsters. Finch wasn't proud of scavenging, but a growling stomach didn't leave much room for pride. He'd learned to be quick, quiet, and to accept that most of what he found would be inedible. That he spotted a half-eaten burger tossed carelessly beside a dumpster. Jackpot that he reached for it, his fingers brushing against the soggy bun when a voice cut through the alley's grimy hum. "You shouldn't be here, Harding." Finch froze, instinctively shrinking back into the shadows. The voice was low, gravelly, laced with fear. He recognized it distantly from the news, one of the local gang leaders. Now, Jimmy, let's not be like that," came the reply, smooth and oiled, like a well-maintained engine. This voice was familiar too, but not from any news broadcast. Finch knew that voice. That it was Detective Harding. Curiosity, that insidious little devil, held Finch captive. That he risked a peek around the corner of the dumpster. Harding stood under the flickering sodium lamp, his expensive trench coat gleaming in the artificial light. He was facing away from Finch, but even from this distance, Finch could see the cold glint in his eyes. Across from him, Jimmy the Hammer Harrison, a man built like a brick shithouse, trembled like a leaf. "I told you, I don't know anything," Harrison stammered, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "I swear, Harding, I'm clean." Harding chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down Finch's spine. It wasn't a laugh of amusement, but of pure, unadulterated menace. "Clean? Jimmy, nobody's clean. That we all got our dirt. It's just a matter of how deep it's buried." He took a step closer, and Finch could see something glint in his hand. A knife. "Look, Harding, whatever you think I know," Harrison began, his voice cracking. The words were cut short by a guttural cry. Harding lunged, the knife flashing in the dim light. Harrison crumpled to the ground, clutching at his chest. The sound of the impact, the wet, sickening thud, echoed in the narrow space. Finch's breath hitched in his throat. That he wanted to scream, to run, but his legs were frozen. That he watched, transfixed by horror, as Harding stood over Harrison, his face impassive, and twisted the knife once, twice. The alley reeked of blood. Harding straightened up, wiping the blade on Harrison's already soaked clothes. He looked around, as if checking for witnesses. His gaze swept over the alley, pausing for a fraction of a second near Finch's hiding place. That Finch's heart hammered against his ribs. He was sure Harding could hear it. Harding seemed satisfied. He turned and strode away, his footsteps echoing in the silence, leaving Finch alone with the body and the horrifying reality of what he had just seen. He didn't think. He ran. He scrambled out of the alley, his feet pounding on the wet pavement. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. Away from the alley, away from Harding, away from the image seared into his brain. He weaved through the city streets, a ghost in the night. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, blurring the neon signs and the passing cars. That he didn't dare look back, didn't dare stop. He was a rat fleeing a trap, every shadow a potential hiding place, every sound a threat. He ducked into a crowded marketplace, the noise and the bustle a temporary shield. The smell of spices and roasting meat filled the air, a stark contrast to the stench of blood. He jostled through the throng of people, trying to lose himself in the anonymity of the crowd. He risked a glance over his shoulder at no sign of Harding. Not yet. But he knew it was only a matter of time. Harding wouldn't leave loose ends. Finch was a loose end. He stumbled, knocking into a man carrying a stack of steaming noodles. The noodles went flying, splattering on the ground. "Watch it, kid!" the man yelled, his face red with anger. Finch mumbled an apology and hurried on, his stomach twisting with anxiety. He needed to get off the streets, somewhere safe. But where could a kid like him go? He had no family, no friends, just the clothes on his back and the memory of a murder burning in his mind. He kept running, blindly, desperately, until he found himself on the edge of the docks, the salty air stinging his face. He leaned against a lamppost, gasping for breath, his body trembling. He was exhausted, terrified, and utterly alone. He closed his eyes, trying to block out the images, the sounds, the smells, but it was no use. Harding's face, cold and ruthless, was etched into his memory. He was a witness in the shadows, and now, his life was worth less than the discarded burger he'd been trying to steal. The reluctant protector. A shard of dawn pierced the greasy film on Bishop's cabin window, striping his rough plank floor with pale light. He was already up. Habit a deeper imprint than comfort after years skirting the shadows. The mingled sense of charred wood and acrid coffee lingered, he moved with spectral grace. A wraith inhabiting his own dwelling. 5 pull-ups on the adze-hewn beam above the doorway. A bracing splash of well water to the face, and then the steady scrape of steel on stone as he sharpened his knife. The ritual soothed, a grounding against the world's attempts to uproot him. Coffee halfway finished. A percussive assault commenced. A frantic tattoo that shattered the morning's fragile stillness. He ignored it, sipping the bitter brew. Let them leave, he was a phantom. Invisible, untouchable. The pounding escalated, now accompanied by a voice, thin and edged with terror. "Hey! Open up! Please, mister." Bishop exhaled, a barely audible sigh. That voice, Finch, Billy Finch, a waif who haunted the town's fringes, a stray scavenging for survival. He set the mug down, the ceramic whispering against the wood, with a reluctance that tasted like ash. He went to the door. Billy was a wreck, eyes wide and haunted, breath coming in ragged gasps. His slight frame trembling violently, grime streaked his cheeks, and a rip in his threadbare jacket exposed a livid scrape on his arm. "Scram, kid," Bishop rasped, his voice rusty from disuse. "I got nothing for you." "They'll kill me?" Billy choked out, grabbing Bishop's sleeve, his grip surprisingly fierce. "You gotta help." Bishop flinched, shaking off the boy's touch as if it carried a shock. "I don't involve myself." A creed, a bulwark forged in the crucible of experience. "But I saw," Billy stammered, his voice cracking like winter ice. "I saw what they did. The cops." He gagged on the words, his gaze flitting nervously around the small clearing. Bishop narrowed his eyes, assessing the boy that he recognized. Fear had smelled its metallic tang on battlefields, tasted its bile in his own dark hours. But this was distinct, a raw, untamed dread that seemed to burrow beneath the skin. He saw truth stamped onto the kid's desperate face. "Saw what?" he asked, his tone softer, tinged with unwilling curiosity. Billy hesitated, his eyes glued to the gloom of the woods ringing the cabin. They murdered him. Down by the docks. Shot him in the back." A cold thread of unease snaked through Bishop. Whispers, insidious rumors of corruption within the town, had reached his ears before. He dismissed them then, finding comfort in denial. "Go to the police," he countered, his voice hardening once more. "Tell them what you witnessed." Billy gave a sharp, hysterical bark of laughter. "The police! They were the ones who did it." Bishop slammed the door, the sound thundering in the small space. He stood there, palm flat against the cool iron latch, wrestling with himself. He needed to stay clear. It wasn't his burden to bear. He'd already settled his debts. He flicked on the ancient television he normally ignored. The local news sputtered to life, the anchor's voice a practice drone. "Investigation is underway into the unfortunate death of Arthur Jenkins, a well-known local businessman. Law enforcement are treating it as a botched robbery. Sources suggest Mr. Jenkins was discovered deceased near the waterfront this morning." A grainy snapshot of Jenkins filled the screen. Bishop remembered the man, a community mainstay, seemingly genuinely good-hearted. The newscaster continued, "Authorities are encouraging anyone with any information to please contact the department." Bishop killed the television, the image collapsing into static snow. He stared at the blank face of the screen, his mind reeling. A robbery gone awry. The cops begging for information? He knew, with a clarity that chilled him to the core, that Billy Finch spoke the truth, and if the police were implicated. His gaze drifted to the window, to the woods where Billy had vanished. He understood what he had to do, even as every fiber of his being urged him to remain still, to stay hidden. He was a ghost, yes, but even ghosts could be tormented by the sins of the living. He snatched his coat, the supple leather a familiar comfort, a reluctant guardian, an unwilling champion, but a protector nonetheless. A man despite everything. And he could not, in good conscience, leave an innocent boy to be consumed by the darkness. Hunted. Harding's fist crashed against the desk's gleaming surface, the sharp report slicing through the still air of the office. Find him, Miller. Finnegan. Alive and then in front of me. The velvet smoothness of his usual tone had curdled into a guttural threat, a pulse hammering visibly at his throat. He knows far too much. Miller, ramrod straight, gave a clipped nod. Understood, detective. Her expression was a carefully constructed blank, concealing the disquiet churning within. This was a line even Harding hadn't crossed before, but questioning him now was a privilege she'd forfeited. The city will be saturated. He won't slip through. Distance is irrelevant. Harding spat, his eyes glacial shards. Eradicate the problem. Comprehend? This needs a final solution. The ice thawed slightly, replaced by the practiced warmth of calculated charm. Consider it pest control. For the city's welfare, Miller, ours included. The taste of copper bloomed on Miller's tongue as she swallowed. Yes, detective. The staccato rhythm of her heels punctuated the sudden silence as she departed, phone in hand. She pictured Finnegan young, frightened, yet possessing a flicker of defiance she couldn't help but acknowledge. She banished the thought, duty was paramount. Across town. Bishop leaned against the hardware store's weathered brick facade, the mingling aromas of cut lumber and iron filings a familiar balm. But the neighborhood's hum was discordant today, an excess of black sedans. Windows like dark voids patrolled the streets. Officers congregated on corners, faces grim, hands hovering near their sidearms. He didn't need police band chatter to understand. A hunt was underway, and a cold premonition told him who the prey was. He cast a glance at the alleyway where Billy should have been retrieving a delivery. The kid was tardy. At a spike of anxiety pierced Bishop's gut. He drew his phone, thumb poised over Billy's contact, then hesitated. A call could be a breadcrumb. If summoned. Billy stumbled from the alley, eyes wide with stark terror. They're hunting me, he blurted, his breath hitching. Cops everywhere. They were asking about me at Mrs. Petrov's, flashing my photo. Bishop gripped Billy's arm, pulling him into the obscurity of the shadows. Photo? Where did they get it? I don't know. Harding, I think he mentioned Harding, said he wanted a little chat. Billy's voice shook. What's going on, Bishop? What have I done? Bishop's jaw clenched. He knew precisely what was happening. Harding was cleaning house. He met Billy's desperate gaze. A choice loomed. Again. We need to vanish now. He guided Billy through a labyrinth of backways and narrow passages, senses screaming. Each darkened doorway felt like an ambush, every passing vehicle a predator in pursuit. He hadn't felt so exposed, so fragile. In years he berated himself for pulling the kid into this, for believing he could simply escape the mire at last. They arrived at an anonymous building on the fringes of the industrial zone. Bishop punched a sequence into the keypad beside the steel door, the lock releasing with a resounding clang. Here, he said, shoving the door inward and urging Billy inside. Safe, for the moment. The interior was stark. Bare concrete, unadorned walls, a solitary metal table and a pair of chairs dominating the space. A cot, draped with a threadbare blanket, stood sentinel in the corner, simple, but secure, a digital dead zone. Billy scanned the space, fear gradually yielding to a nascent hope. What is this place? Bishop sighed. A sanctuary for the invisible. He retrieved a first aid kit and a shrink-wrapped ration pack from a small cabinet. Eat. Rest. I have calls to make. He left the recipient unspecified. He didn't have to elaborate. Billy understood that as Billy tore at the package, Bishop stared at the steel portal, the burden of responsibility crushing his shoulders. He had tried to remain untouched, to shield himself from the inevitable fallout. But Harding had made it a vendetta, and now, the game was truly afoot, underground. The safe house was a basement apartment beneath a laundromat, the rhythmic thrum of industrial washers a constant, almost comforting presence. Bishop flipped a single bare bulb on, revealing a cramped space furnished with the barest essentials. A stained mattress on the floor, a rickety table, and two mismatched chairs. The air hung thick with the scent of bleach and stale detergent. Home sweet home, Bishop said. His voice flat, he gestured around the room with a hand that looked like it could crush stone. Keep the lights low, don't order takeout. Don't make noise after 10 and Finch. He fixed Billy with a stare that could freeze hell over. Don't trust anyone. Especially not me. Billy swallowed, the bravado he'd affected earlier momentarily gone. Right? He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. The washing machines rattled above them. So what now? Now we wait, Bishop said, pulling a tarp off a corner, revealing a dusty laptop and a tangle of wires. And I try to figure out who wants you dead. Upstairs, the city was a canvas of blinking lights and pulsing sirens. Down here, it was a tomb, silent save for the relentless churn of soapy water. Billy watched Bishop work, his fingers flying across the keyboard with a speed that belied his age. He was a ghost in this place. A shadow moving through the digital world, searching for answers. Billy felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he'd picked the right guy to trust. Across town, Sergeant Evelyn Miller kicked in the door of Uncle Tony's barbershop. The place was a haze of hairspray and cheap cologne. The air thick with the murmur of gossip. Tony, a portly man with a comb over that defied gravity, looked up from shaving a customer, his eyes widening in alarm. Sergeant Miller, Tony said, his voice trembling slightly. To what do I owe the pleasure? Miller didn't answer. Her team swarmed the place, flipping chairs, emptying drawers, and barking orders. She walked straight to Tony, her eyes cold and hard. Where is he, Tony? Who, Sergeant? I don't know what you're talking about. He wrung his hands, a bead of sweat trickling down his forehead. Miller grabbed him by the collar, her grip surprisingly strong. Don't play dumb with me, Tony. Bishop. Where is he? Tony sputtered, his face turning red. I haven't seen Bishop in months. Years, maybe. Miller slammed him against the barber's chair, the customer letting out a yelp. You're lying. He always comes crawling back to you. You're his family, Tony? And family sticks together, doesn't it? She released him, stepping back. Fine. Play it your way. But know this, every single one of your family is going to feel the heat until Bishop shows his face. Her gaze swept over the terrified faces in the barber shop. Understand. Back in the laundromat basement, Bishop cracked a wry smile. Gotcha, Harding. He muttered that he'd bypassed the precinct's firewall, a feat that took him back to his glory days. The screen filled with Harding's personnel file, then his financials, then his communications logs. The deeper Bishop dug, the more rotten the picture became. Bribes, payoffs, shady real estate deals. Harding was knee-deep in it. But there was something else, something buried deep in the encrypted files, something he couldn't quite reach. What's going on? Billy asked, watching Bishop's intense focus. Harding's dirty, Bishop said, his eyes still glued to the screen. Filthy even. But there's something more. Something he's hiding. He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. And I'm going to find out what it is. The washing machines above them spun faster, the rumble a deafening counterpoint to the quiet hum of the laptop. The hunt was on, close call. We need everything we can get our hands on, Bishop said, tracing a grime-coated finger across a tattered map spread on the makeshift table. Med supplies are critical. Enough food to last us at least a week. And, he paused, his gaze hardening, anything that can level the playing field. Billy, perched on an upturned crate, gnawed on a fingernail. Level the playing field how, exactly? I've seen your playing field leveling skills. Involves a lot of broken bones. Sometimes it does, Bishop admitted, his jaw tight. But this time we're outnumbered. Outgunned. I'm thinking explosives. Small ones, just enough to create a distraction. Explosives? Bishop, where are we going to get explosives? Billy's voice rose in alarm. There's a demolition site on the edge of the industrial district. They won't be well guarded at night. We move fast, grab what we need, and get out. The plan, like most plans involving Bishop, was simple and brutally efficient. But simple didn't mean safe. The demolition site was a maze of corrugated iron and half-collapsed buildings. the air thick with the metallic tang of rust and decay. They navigated the shadows, Billy a nervous shadow trailing behind Bishop, until they reached the storage shed. The flimsy padlock yielded easily to Bishop's lockpicks. Inside, crates of blasting caps and dynamite sticks were stacked haphazardly. Bishop worked with practiced efficiency, loading a duffel bag while Billy kept watch, his hand instinctively reaching for the small, rusty pipe he'd started carrying. That's when the dogs started barking. A floodlight snapped on, blinding them. "Freeze! Police!" A voice boomed through a megaphone. Harding that he'd anticipated them. "Run, Billy, now!" Bishop roared, shoving the duffel bag into Billy's hands. Billy didn't hesitate. He sprinted into the darkness, weaving between piles of rubble, the weight of the explosives heavy in his arms. Bishop stayed behind, buying him time, drawing the attention of the officers who swarmed the shed entrance. Bishop moved like a phantom, a blur of controlled violence. He disarmed one officer, using him as a human shield against the others. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the deserted industrial park. He managed to break through the cordon. Diving into the night, adrenaline coursing through his veins, he found Billy huddled behind a stack of concrete pipes, his face pale. "They're everywhere. Bishop, we're trapped." "Not yet," Bishop said, his voice grim. He spotted a beat-up sedan parked near the perimeter fence. "Get in. And hold on tight." The engine roared to life, shattering the night's silence. Bishop slammed the car into gear and plowed through the chain-link fence, showering sparks and metal that Harding's men were right behind them, 2 black SUVs in hot pursuit. The chase was on. Bishop navigated the narrow streets of the industrial district with reckless abandon, the sedan fishtailing wildly as he took corners at breakneck speed. Bullets whizzed past, shattering the rear window. "They're gaining on us," Billy screamed, ducking low in the passenger seat. "I know," Bishop growled, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. He swerved to avoid a pothole, sending the car careening towards a stack of wooden pallets. He slammed on the brakes at the last second, sending the pursuing SUVs scrambling to avoid a collision. He took a sharp turn onto a highway heading towards the city, dodging between vehicles. The city lights blurred as Bishop pushed the car to its limit. He could see the desperation in Billy's eyes, the fear etched on his young face. He wouldn't let Harding get him. Not now. He noticed one of the black SUVs pulling up alongside them. He could see Harding in the passenger seat, his face contorted with rage. Harding raised his weapon and started firing. Bishop floored it. Suddenly, the tires of the pursuing SUVs screeched as they pulled to a halt. Sirens wailed in the distance. Harding's plan foiled. "What happened?" Billy asked, his voice trembling. "That was Detective Sergeant Evelyn Miller," Bishop replied. "She must have seen something during her interrogation with Tony." Bishop knew this was far from over. Harding wouldn't give up easily. He was a cornered animal, and cornered animals were the most dangerous. The journalist. The burner phone buzzed against the worn countertop, displaying a single, masked number. Bishop regarded it, the motel room's meager light glinting in his tired gaze. The past hours were a blur of erased tracks through the digital back alleys of the warehouse district. "This call was lighting the fuse," he answered. "Chun." A voice responded, efficient and crisp. "Sarah Chun." Her broadcast persona, all sharp angles. "Bishop?" he rumbled, his voice raspy from disuse, a beat of silence. "I thought you were a myth. Myths can bleed into reality. That I possess information vital to you. Proof, irrefutable." He dictated a rendezvous point. A deserted loading dock south of the city, 2 hours hence, and no courtesies. No context. He severed the connection. The pressure in his chest immense. He'd unleashed chaos. Sarah Chun was walking into the storm's heart. Sarah stared at the phone, her gut twisting with apprehension. "Bishop," the legend whispered in backrooms, the Avenger dispensing justice with lethal precision. His call signaled the culmination of her months-long pursuit of police corruption. The story was primed to detonate. 2 hours later, the heavy night air clung to her skin as she neared the dock. Corrosion bloomed on the metal, illuminated solely by a sputtering street lamp that cast grotesque shadows. Bishop materialized from the gloom. He pressed a thumb drive into her hand, the metal a frigid weight. "Everything's on there," he stated, Testimonies, forensics, Harding's hidden assets. Enough to sink him. Why me? She queried, meeting his gaze. Why trust me with this? His eyes, guarded and deep-set, locked onto hers. Because you're the only one digging in the right places. The only one who truly cares. Turning, he vanished back into the darkness. Be careful, Chun. Harding won't concede easily. Back in her threadbare apartment, the drone of her ancient computer filled the room as Sarah downloaded the files. Hours dissolved into a frantic survey of data, verification, and cross-referencing. The evidence was devastating. Harding, the celebrated detective, was a serpent disguised in fine tailoring, corruption staining his hands. Publication was paramount. The story broke at 6 a.m., a digital shockwave rippling across the city. The headline blazed, Detective Harding, Saint or Sinner? Her inbox immediately overflowed with a tumultuous mix of affirmations, threats, and demands for additional details. By midday, the retaliation commenced. It wasn't the anticipated public fury, but something colder, more deliberate. Anonymous online profiles launched attacks on her credibility, resurrecting older articles, distorting her commentary, branding her a sensationalist, a charlatan. Then came the insidious leaks to rival news sources. Baseless rumors targeting her private life, accusations of intellectual theft, hushed suggestions of a personal crusade against the police. Sarah watched, aghast, as her reputation, meticulously cultivated over years of dedicated work, began to disintegrate. Harding wasn't refuting the evidence, but assassinating her character. Her phone trilled her editor. His voice strained with anxiety. Sarah, we're retracting the piece. Legal is concerned. They're claiming the evidence is circumstantial, the source is compromised. But it's not, Sarah protested, her voice rising in pitch. It's all documented. He's behind this, he's defaming me. I understand, Sarah. I believe you. But we can't risk litigation. We're pulling it down. The line went dead. Sarah stared at the sterile glow of the monitor, the crushing weight of Harding's influence bearing down on her. He was prevailing. He was suppressing the truth and burying her alongside it. But gazing out the window, the sunlight reflecting off the glassy facades of the distant skyscrapers, Sarah knew she couldn't surrender. The truth demanded to be voiced, regardless of the personal toll. She simply needed to discover an alternative route. Turning point. The rain hammered against the corrugated iron roof of the abandoned warehouse. Each drop a nail hammered into Billy's resolve. He scrubbed a hand over his face, the grime smearing across his skin. It's my fault, Bishop. All of it. I saw what Harding did. I should have kept my mouth shut. Bishop sat on an overturned crate, a silhouette against the weak light filtering through the grimy windows. He didn't speak, didn't offer the easy platitudes Billy craved, just watched him with those unervingly steady eyes. I'm going to turn myself in, Billy blurted, the words tasting like ash. Tell them what I saw. Maybe they'll believe me. Bishop finally stirred, the crate groaning beneath his weight as he leaned forward. Believe you? After the stunt you pulled at the precinct? You think Harding's going to let you walk in there and tell your story? What choice do I have? We can't keep running. Billy's voice cracked. The weight of the past few days pressed down on him, suffocating him. He was tired of being scared, tired of looking over his shoulder. Bishop stood, the movement fluid and silent despite his size. He walked towards Billy, stopping just close enough to be intimidating. You have a choice. You can be a lamb led to slaughter, or you can fight. Fight? Against who? The cops? Harding? Billy threw his hands up. We're screwed. Bishop. We're completely screwed. Bishop's hand shot out, gripping Billy's arm with surprising force. Listen to me. Harding doesn't just want to silence you. He wants you gone. Permanently. Billy recoiled. What are you talking about? Think about it. Finch. He killed that informant, right? And who was there? You. And who ran? Bishop's gaze intensified. He's setting you up. Kid, you're not just a witness anymore, you're the fall guy. The realization dawned slowly, a chilling frost spreading through Billy's veins. The hurried questioning. the dismissive glances, the way they'd focused solely on him at the precinct, he all clicked into place. "He's framing me?" "He's framing us," Bishop corrected, his voice low and dangerous. "Helping you escape made me complicit. Now I'm just as expendable." Billy staggered back, his breath catching in his throat. "But why? Why go to all this trouble?" "Protection," Bishop said, his jaw tight. "Whatever that informant had on him, it must be big enough to risk everything." The warehouse suddenly felt smaller, the dripping rain a constant, mocking reminder of their vulnerability. The air hung thick with the scent of damp concrete and desperation. "So what do we do?" Billy asked, his voice barely a whisper. He looked at Bishop, searching for answers, for a glimmer of hope in the man's impassive face. That Bishop's eyes narrowed. "We disappear, we become ghosts, and then we make Harding regret the day he ever met us." He moved to the window, peering out into the rain-slicked street. The flashing blue and red of police lights reflected in the puddles, growing closer. "Too late for ghosts," Bishop muttered, his hand instinctively moving towards the Sig Sauer tucked under his jacket. "They're already here." He glanced back at Billy. "Looks like we're officially fugitives, Finch. Welcome to the other side. Gala showdown." "You sure about this, Bishop?" Billy fiddled with the borrowed catering uniform, the white fabric too stiff, too clean. The scent of industrial detergent clung to him, a stark contrast to the gritty alleys he usually navigated. Bishop ignored him, eyes scanning the blueprints spread across the hood of the stolen van. The blueprints, lifted from a disgruntled architect, showed the grand ballroom where the police gala was being held. "We go in through the service entrance. I take Harding. You cover our escape. Stick to the plan, Finch. Easy for you to say. You're the one walking into a room full of cops." Billy adjusted the ill-fitting uniform again. "And Harding's not exactly going to waltz off quietly. This ain't a tea party, Bishop." Bishop's jaw tightened. He knew the risks. Every calculated move, every silent prayer was overshadowed by the ghosts of his past failures. He couldn't afford another one. He has to be stopped. This is the only way. The grand ballroom shimmered under the light of 1,000 chandeliers. Music, too sweet and too loud, bounced off the marble floors. Uniformed officers, off-duty but still carrying themselves with an air of authority, mingled with civilians in expensive gowns and tailored suits. The scent of perfume and stale champagne hung thick in the air. Bishop moved with purpose, weaving through the crowd, Billy a hesitant shadow behind him. They reached the raised dais where Harding stood, microphone in hand, basking in the adoration of the room. "And so, it is with great pride that I accept this award," Harding's voice boomed, slick with self-importance, "for my unwavering commitment to justice." Bishop stepped forward, the clinking of ice in nearby champagne flutes suddenly deafening. He pulled the flash drive from his pocket. "That's a lie, Harding." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Bishop, the uninvited guest in his too clean catering uniform. Harding's face hardened. "Who is this man?" "Security." Bishop ignored the growing murmur, the approaching figures in dark suits. He flicked the flash drive towards Sarah Chun, the journalist he'd contacted earlier, standing near the edge of the crowd. Evidence of Harding's corruption. "Get it out there, Chun." Sarah caught the drive, her eyes widening in understanding. She vanished into the throng. "You just made a very big mistake," Harding hissed, stepping down from the dais. "The biggest mistake was letting you get away with it for so long." Bishop's hand moved beneath his jacket, the weight of his silenced pistol a cold comfort. Harding nodded to someone in the crowd. A shot rang out, shattering a chandelier overhead. Chaos erupted. Screams filled the ballroom as people dove for cover. Billy, true to his word, produced a smoke grenade from under his uniform, tossing it into the center of the room. A thick, choking cloud billowed outwards, obscuring everything. Bishop used the confusion to his advantage, pushing through the panicked crowd. Towards Harding, he found him near the service entrance. 2 uniformed officers flanking him, guns drawn. "It's over, Harding," Bishop growled, leveling his pistol. "Not by a long shot." Harding shoved one of the officers forward, using him as a human shield. Bishop hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, and Harding used the opportunity to strike. The detective's fist connected with Bishop's jaw, sending him stumbling backwards. He lost his grip on the pistol that it clattered to the marble floor. The officers opened fire. Bishop ducked behind an overturned table, the bullets ripping through the linen tablecloth. Harding advanced, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You thought you could take me down? You're nothing, Bishop. Just a washed-up has-been." Bishop surged to his feet, adrenaline coursing through him that he launched himself at Harding, tackling him to the ground. The two men grappled, a brutal, desperate struggle in the midst of the chaos. Harding was strong. Fueled by years of unchecked power, he landed a solid punch to Bishop's ribs. Stealing his breath, Bishop retaliated with a knee to Harding's groin, eliciting a grunt of pain. They rolled across the floor, exchanging blows. Bishop, fueled by righteous fury and the weight of his past, slowly gained the upper hand as he pinned Harding beneath him, his fist raised, ready to deliver the final blow. But then he paused, staring into Harding's terrified eyes. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. He couldn't become like Harding. "Miller!" A voice cut through the din. Sergeant Miller that he released Harding, scrambled to his feet, and vanished into the smoke-filled ballroom. Billy a shadow at his heels. They had exposed Harding. Now, they just had to survive. Justice served. The steel bit into Harding's wrists, the click like a slammed door in the shocked stillness of the precinct. His face, usually a study in practiced control, contorted with incandescent rage. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, futilely testing the restraints. "I'm Detective Harding. You need me on the streets." His outburst was met with the stony silence of two officers who steered him away. The arrest unfolded cleanly, swiftly, and with an unnerving lack of fanfare, thanks to Sarah Chen's orchestrated reveal of her exposé. The floodgates had opened. Bishop, a silent observer in the corner, betrayed nothing in his expression. The adrenaline surge of moments ago ebbed, leaving in its wake a familiar, bone-deep fatigue. Miller followed Harding, hustled out, her eyes like trapped birds flitting in search of non-existent exits. Other officers trailed behind, their countenances a tableau of guilt and burgeoning panic. The cancer was being cut away, piece by agonizing piece. Sarah approached Bishop, her face a fragile mosaic of relief and profound gratitude. "It's over," she rasped, her voice roughened with exhaustion. "The story's live. The evidence verified. It's everywhere." Bishop gave a curt nod, his gaze sweeping over the chaotic landscape of the precinct. Unanswered phones bleated incessantly. Scattered paperwork formed drifts on abandoned desks, artifacts of a fallen regime. "Good. You were incredible, Bishop," Sarah insisted, her hand briefly resting on his arm. A feather-light touch of appreciation. "You toppled a monster. And you rescued that boy." He offered no reply. Turning to find Billy, he saw him perched on a bench near the entrance, looking diminished, stripped bare of the bravado he usually affected. A plainclothes officer stood sentinel. "Ready, Finch?" Bishop asked, his voice gentled. Billy looked up, his eyes still swimming in a sea of red that he swallowed visibly. "Yeah," he whispered, the sound barely audible. "I guess so." The officer moved forward, his tone professional. "We're set whenever you are, Mr. Finnegan. Everything's in place. Fresh start, clean slate. They won't touch you again." Bishop knelt before Billy, his hand a steadying weight on the boy's shoulder. "You're going to be fine. Kid, you're tougher than you think. You can do this." Billy met his gaze, and for the first time, Bishop glimpsed a fragile spark of hope flickering in their depths. "Thanks, Bishop," he murmured, a ghost of a smile gracing his lips, "for everything you've done." They exchanged a handshake, a silent pact forged in the crucible of shared trauma. Bishop watched as Billy, accompanied by the officer, vanished through the doors, embarking on a future shrouded in uncertainty but finally liberated from Harding's malevolent grasp. That he lingered. The precinct now feeling eerily desolate. Sarah had departed, filing her final reports. The remaining officers were either under interrogation or desperately attempting to fade into the wallpaper. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken recriminations, the acrid tang of betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Bishop stepped out into the cool embrace of the night. The city lights blurring into indistinct halos, he flagged down a cab, reciting his address to the driver as the taxi surged forward. He closed his eyes. The monotonous drone of the engine a soothing balm on frayed nerves. The first tendrils of dawn were painting the sky when he reached his cabin. The air possessed a bracing clarity, imbued with the clean sense of pine needles and damp earth. The familiar groan of the door hinges greeted him as he unlocked it. Inside, the scene remained untouched. The hearth held only cold ashes, the legacy of a long-dead fire. He moved to the window. His gaze drawn to the still, reflective surface of the lake, he poured a measure of whiskey. The amber liquid catching the nascent light in the glass, he took a deliberate sip, letting the warmth unfurl within him. Not a cure, but a temporary easement that he pictured Billy embarking on his new life, that he wished the boy could find a measure of peace, a sliver of happiness. He'd earned it, and he thought of Harding, incarcerated. His power and influence irrevocably shattered. Justice, however imperfect, had been rendered. He set down his glass and crossed to the back of the cabin, to a neglected corner where he kept a small, time-worn box that contained fragments of a life lived, faded photographs, yellowed letters, a dull silver star. He picked up a picture of a young woman, her radiant smile undimmed by time, her arm looped around a soldier in uniform, his wife. Lost to the darkness, he fought so relentlessly. He held the photograph, his face a canvas etched with regret and sorrow. He closed the box, the click of the latch like a final punctuation mark in a silent conversation. He had done what he could. He had shielded the vulnerable. Perhaps, just perhaps, redemption might still be within reach. He returned to the window and watched the sun ascend, bathing the lake in a radiant, golden light. He drew a deep breath, the crisp air invigorating his lungs. A new day, a chance to begin again. And for the first time in what felt like an eternity, John Bishop sensed a tentative stirring of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could finally find rest.